it's almost like there's an insecurity and how much they value themselves. They're seeking that, even if it's a negative way. They're drawing attention to themselves in their suffering.
Yes, because they want other people to understand their suffering.
Mm-hmm.
But most people look at it and say, well, it doesn't have to be this way.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be this way. So sometimes when you're trying to give somebody who's a victim an out, they don't want an out.
Yeah.
So you can give them an out and they're like, no, that's not good enough. That
Mm-hmm.
can't happen. That can't work that way.
Yeah.
Hey, Taryn.
Hey, Julie.
Guess what we're talking about today?
What are we talking about?
We're talking about how to deal with people that have a victim mentality.
Mm.
And so not only how to deal with them, but how we can help them.
Yeah.
And so I think it can be a little difficult because most people that have a victim mentality are unaware that they have a victim mentality.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think I have a victim mentality, but being around those that might have a victim mentality makes it very challenging. So how do I help them? Tell me the answers. Because I have people that come to mind. I do.
You're so eager. You're so eager today.
Why do I always want to fix things?
So here's the thing. The first thing we have to do is kind of understand where they're coming from.
Sure.
And so victim mentality is they also, one of the main things they think about and how they perceive the world is they don't have control over anything. Everything is just happening to them.
Yeah.
So external locus of control. Mm-hmm. Like all these things just happen to me.
Right. I just live in this world and all these things are coming at me and I can't do anything about it.
And my life is a product of all these life circumstances and I can't change anything.
Mm.
And so they don't feel empowered to be able to step out of things or situations or circumstances that they've been put in.
Mm-hmm.
And so because they don't feel empowered, they just feel stuck.
That's just sad. That's just sad because I don't think that way. So it's hard for me to relate. It's really hard for me to relate to someone that's kind of stuck like that.
Well, because you're prone to solving the problem.
Right.
So you're prone to, I don't like this situation. I don't like how this is playing out. What are some solutions to get us out of this situation?
Yeah.
Victims do not think that way.
Mm.
Victims thrive on the fact that things are happening to them and they get attention from that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So their identity comes from the fact that they're the victim.
Yeah. Certain situations certainly come to mind. And one of those is maybe someone who has an illness or something like that where they're dealing with different, pain in the body or different illnesses or things like that where it's constantly a focus. And certainly I want to try to be empathetic and I do, and I might ask questions, but then there are times when I'm like, can I just help you fix it and move on? Is that wrong?
Let's just be honest about what you're talking about. So
what am I talking about?
When I say that I'm not feeling well, the first thing you ask me is, well, what's your diet like and have you been exercising?
Oh, yeah. Did you sleep last night?
Yes.
Well, that's just the way I operate. Like I try to fix, I try to solve. I can't help it.
Yeah. So
Did you sleep last night?
Yeah, I did. So I feel like people like us who want to solve the problem and we look into, you've talked about this. When I wake up in the morning and I don't feel good, I go back. What did I eat? What happened yesterday?
Yeah.
Is there something that should I have moved more? Was I on the computer too long? I think about those things to determine why I feel this way because I don't want to repeat that. Mm-hmm. I don't want to repeat that because I don't want to feel bad again.
Yeah.
But people who are used to it just think that's the way life is and they don't have any control over it.
Yeah.
Relinquish any control that they and any type of responsibility they need to take over that situation.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. I'm sorry. I'm just thinking about myself. Like I'm really, as we're talking, I'm just thinking about myself and how I experience someone who is constantly in that place. It's exhausting for me being a friend or a daughter or a family member. When you experience a family member or somebody you know who's constantly in that place, it's exhausting. And you have to ask yourself, like, how much more can I take?
Yeah.
Without saying something. And then you try to say something without hurting their feelings. And then you obviously can't solve all their problems either.
Well, victim mindset, what you'll notice in victims is they have cycles. So they'll have the same cycle. The same thing happens every time they get a job. The same thing happens every time they get into a relationship. They just have the same things going on all the time throughout their life. And so it's because there's never been a place where they feel empowered to say, this is the end of this. Mm-hmm. And this stops here and this ends with me. Yeah. Right? So they don't feel empowered to do that. So you'll see cycles. I have a friend of mine who every time she starts a job, we're 1 weekend, they're like, oh, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. But then when I look back, I'm like, about 15 years, it's always like this. So it's you.
Yeah.
It's you. And not that every workplace is wonderful, but there's a cycle. She's the victim.
To the environment.
For work, at least for work. She's the victim. And so they're not doing this right, they're not doing that right. And so I think back, even when we were in college, she was like that. Oh, this place is just, And so that's a cycle. Mm-hmm. It's a mindset that she's refusing to change. And so what happens is you get tired of hearing about it.
Yeah. As the other person who's experienced it is, I just want to fix the problem. Wake them up,
Because your mindset is, let's not be a victim anymore to circumstances that we can change.
Well, exactly. And the thing is my goal is for the person to be able to value themselves enough to be like, hey, I don't have to be in this position. I've been here long enough. So my question is, how do I help somebody who's in that cycle, or I might see that cycle? How do I empower them when all I want to do is fix it?
You help them take steps into wanting to realize if they really do want to fix it. Remember this, victims seek validation through their suffering. Mm-hmm. So when you go try to fix it,
I got to be patient, don't
there is a chance.
I have to be patient,
Patience does belong in relationships too.
I know. What?
But if they seek validation through their suffering, there is a chance that you're trying to fix something they really don't want fixed. They like being the black sheep that's suffering and the one that's doing all the work and the one that's laboring and the one they might like that because they get their identity from that.
Well, the other thing too is the attention is on them. So part of me wonders and I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's almost like there's an insecurity and how much they value themselves. They're seeking that, even if it's a negative way. They're drawing attention to themselves in their suffering.
Yes, because they want other people to understand their suffering. Mm-hmm. But most people look at it and say, well, it doesn't have to be this way. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be this way. So sometimes when you're trying to give somebody who's a victim an out, they don't want an out.
Yeah.
So you can give them an out and they're like, no, that's not good enough. That can't happen. That can't work that way.
Yeah.
And so I'll give you an example. We have a family, that person's no longer alive anymore, but there was a daughter that became the caregiver. Mm-hmm. And that she naturally became a caregiver, I think, because of proximity. I think she lived the closest to the mom.
Sure.
And so she was just like, oh, I'll take care of mom. I live the closest. She had other siblings.
Yeah.
And I think what happened there is she just became the caregiver. Even though I felt, and I could be wrong, the other siblings were willing to help. Hey, I'll take mom to doctor's appointments. I'll take mom to this. I can do this for mom. I'll get the groceries. But it was no, the way the siblings were doing was not good enough. So she had to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what's happening is even though there's an out, there's not an out because she's the victim and she's suffering.
But because she's the victim and she wants to control things too.
Yeah, in that situation, I do think that. Now, I could be wrong, but then it was almost like this pity party, and everyone needs to sit here and talk about how great she is and what she's doing. But the siblings are like, I could do that. It's not a big deal, and so I can pay for that. That's not a big deal. And I just thought it was a very strange phenomena, but then I realized, oh, she's a victim.
Yeah.
She's a victim. And because she's the victim, she's going to take it all on and be like, yeah, it is what it is. I'll just deal with it. I'll just deal with it. And then you get sympathy from other people. But people like you are not going to give sympathy.
Why is this? As we sit here talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many things I need to work on about myself. Seriously, I try to have patience. And when I see somebody who's stuck in a place of self-pity, I just want to fix it for them. And my, what did we say when we were talking about this? My empathy.
Fatigue.
Yeah, my empathy gets fatigued. And so then it just kind of dwindles. But that's a bad place to be in too, to find yourself in, because you genuinely care about this person. But if they don't have a desire to want to fix things or to better their situation, and you're trying to sympathize with the situation, but they're stuck in it, it's almost like, I don't know how to help you.
Yeah. So empathy fatigue is real because in the beginning, you're wanting to understand and you're wanting to help, but you're noticing as much as you help and you try to help give them possible ways of coming out of a situation.
Yeah.
They're not embracing that.
Sure.
So then it doesn't become empathy anymore. Mm-hmm. Now you don't feel with them. Now you're just like, well, that's the choices you've chosen in life. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And so now you don't, and so it kind of comes off as being mean or insensitive.
Yeah.
But really is you were empathetic on the front end and probably for many years.
Yeah.
And very empathetic. But then you realize, no, these are the choices you have made in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And you've chosen this life for yourself.
Yeah.
And there's no one to blame other than yourself.
Yeah.
And they don't have that realization or awareness yet.
Yeah.
And so you kind of get hard on yourself because now people are like, she's so mean to them.
Why she's so intense? I'm like, I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
You know?
No, it does, because being around victims is very exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
Emotionally and just mentally, it's very exhausting because all they have is problems that can't be solved. And part of the issue, and I think we brought this up one time, was some of it is the lack of self-discipline and lack of self-love.
Yeah.
They don't feel like they deserve it, or they're unable to really make that change for themselves. They don't feel worthy enough to make that change. Yeah.
Well, you know, and I realize like caring for a family member or a parent or something like that, that's a hard situation. So I don't want to, I mean, I'm really not a jerk, but, but like I want to be sensitive. That's a tough situation to be in. But as I'm sitting here reflecting, you know, like, talking about health or decisions that you make, or even if it's lifestyle, you know, the example you give is good, but I think that's tough. You know, if it's, you know, the victimhood, let's say about self-care or discipline in exercise or eating or something like that. I mean, I like to go to the gym. I realize that not everybody likes to go to the gym.
Yes. Thank you for realizing that.
Are you glad I didn't put together like a workout for us yesterday morning?
Yes, I am. We went on a walk. It was fine.
A walk. I'm just like, I need to lift, you know,
Yeah.
I might get to the
With
gym.
your 30 burpees and all. Yeah.
I don't like burpees. Okay.
Yeah. But
we just
always,
incorporate them.
Yeah. But they're always on the list.
Not always, not every day.
Okay.
Not every day. Anyways, what were we talking about? Discipline. And so, for example, talking about discipline and eating and body, for me, because it's something I enjoy, I know how to fix the problem. If you're feeling, you know, tired all the time and, you know, you feel like you're not strong or even physically, like mentally, the gym, for me, maybe it just solves my problem.
You can just say it's me, Taryn.
What
you're talking about?
No,
She's been trying to get me to go to the gym for like 3 years now. Okay, go ahead.
Well, you coming with me? Maybe. But so for me, like, I don't know, maybe it's just the way I'm built, the way I'm wired. Like, I want to see people better themselves because I truly want to believe that we all are capable of so much more than what we actually are doing. And when you're in a gym all the time, like, it's something that comes along with that territory, right? Like, you do hard things and you get through it and you're like, dang, I made it. I'm proud of myself. I put in the work, you know, and that could be the same for eating or being disciplined in your diet, you know?
Yeah. But I think victim mindset is learned. So I think we learn it at a young age, especially with parental figures or grandparents or something. You're learning that behavior of being a martyr. Yeah. And you're learning that behavior. And then we talk about echo chambers. Echo chambers are surrounding yourself with people that really feed into the victim mentality. Yeah. So they like to, because they get their validation from it. Sure. So if you grew up in that type of family and that's happening, right? Yeah. So then it's like the martyrdom complex. It's like, I'm going to take one for the team, but you're always taking one for the team. Right. So if there's almost I feel like there's almost a feeling of, I don't need to feel, I'm not worthy enough to be able to come out of this. This is just my lot in life. It goes back to the external locus of control. Yeah. Like, it's just happening to me. Mm-hmm. This is just what's happening to me. So I feel like they do have a difficult time. And then they might be doing something good. Like, caring for somebody is doing something good. Yeah. So for you to say to yourself, I don't want to care for this person, I want to do this with my life, can seem like something bad.
Yeah.
Does
it
that make
can.
sense? So you might feel guilty in even drawing the boundary because the right thing to do is to care. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I feel like culturally, I think we talked about this.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime culturally, and this is just me growing up, somebody would say, well, I can't do that. I have to do this. We called it selfishness. But really, in hindsight, I look back, I was like, no, it was their boundary.
Yeah.
It was the boundary that, hey, I'm not taking on this responsibility that's not mine. I'll help, but I'm not taking the whole responsibility on.
Yeah.
And culturally, we used to think because the obligation to family and duty and society and community, these are the right things to do. But really was, I just lacked boundaries.
Yeah.
And other people had boundaries and didn't feel the obligations that I felt.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And, you and I, we've talked about just our upbringing and culture and being a part of like Southeast Asian culture there is a responsibility that comes with family, like period. And when you set boundaries or you do something differently, it does look like you're disrespecting the family. And it can lead to some hard conversations, which is what we just talked about recently too. But I do think that sometimes it's necessary.
Yeah. And I think we push they're just Western mindset, like the love of self, because they're drawing boundaries. And that is not the case. They've made a decision that this is not going to be, I'm not taking on this problem that's been created fully. I'll love you, I'll care for you.
Yeah.
But I'm not taking the whole thing on. And really it's not selfishness. It's just a boundary they've created.
Yeah. It makes me think of situation within family and where somebody that I'm close to had to care for another family member. And part of it, like you said earlier, was the proximity. Part of it was availability too, and family situation for this particular person. And I definitely, looking back and thinking about it now, there were definitely times where she did not do a great job in drawing the boundaries to the point of exhaustion herself as she was taking care of someone. And in hindsight, it's like your heart breaks for that person because it took them a little while. It took this woman a little while to kind of get back to a place of, I can breathe again. I can figure out my life again, because they were so caught up caring for a family member that there wasn't healthy boundaries.
Yeah. And sometimes in the love that we have for the person we're caregiving for, we do it because we love them.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's okay too. But, kind of going back to the victim mindset, it's like there has to be a better way. There has to be a better balance. And I think if it's like, so I think sometimes for those that are in that situation, you want to help them. You want to empower them to have healthier boundaries. And you said that earlier on too, is how do we, if it's me and I recognize a family member or someone that's in that position, like what is the best way, I guess, that I can help empower them to make small changes? Like how do I help somebody make small changes? Because I don't know. Why do I want to fix everybody's problems?
Well, I think, so I have a friend that comes to mind who always dates the wrong guy.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's a cycle.
Sure.
Because with victims, it is a cycle. They attract the same type of people.
Yeah.
That mistreat them, to be completely honest.
Sure.
And so I remember going through the last guy that she had dated. I remember going through a season of kind of asking her questions. Do you consider this to be an act of love? Like, do you feel like him controlling you is somehow confused with love or care or protection? Because protection really looks like this, but this looks more like control. Does that make sense? And having just kind of asking some questions of what.
So part of the empowering, I guess, of that person might even be just making them aware of the situation and seeing things maybe through a different perspective.
Yeah, and it's not even you bringing it up, but them kind of realizing themselves.
Yeah.
And so I don't ever tell them.
Sure.
I ask them.
Yeah.
Well, tell me why you feel like this is so loving. And what do you feel like that? How does that make you feel? Because we really have to get into why you're attracting this type of person.
Sure.
And it always ends the same way, which is poorly.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, it's helping people. I want them to have a self-realization of what's happening.
Yeah, I think that's the whole point, really, is someone who is stuck in that victim mindset is how do you help them be more aware? That's really the answer, because you can't fix it, especially if they don't want to. If they're needing that attention that way and that sympathy and they want to stay in that place, that's one thing. But someone who's maybe unaware that they're, a victim is helping them have that realization.
Most victims are unaware.
Yeah.
that they're victims. Most victims are unaware they're in a victim mindset. Most victims are unaware that they're sabotaging themselves by thinking that way. So I think if it's really somebody you have a close relationship and you really do want to help, I think it's walking them through the self-awareness and they get the awareness of, oh, wait a minute. I didn't realize this.
Yeah.
And so I think that helps empower them.
Yeah.
To want to make a change. And then even accountability, like to help them be like, hey, if you need accountability in this area, I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good.
So I think that's just, if we're really aiming to meet them with where their need is. And as far as the draining part of it and dealing with them on a day-to-day basis, I think it's continually, every time there's a victim mindset statement that comes out, you oppose it with a positive reinforcing one that can push them in a different direction for a different thought process.
Yeah.
And so they don't get to control the narrative, the negativity, and the victimhood. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So every time there's a victim mindset statement, you try to trump that with a positive, reinforced statement of what they're able to do and how much they can control, and then empower them that way, because then that loses power.
Yeah.
That loses power. And so the more power, if being a victim then feels powerless, they'll want to empower themselves.